Hey, here's how you can create powerful future bass drops just like ILLENIUM. In this video, we'll be producing an insane future bass drop from scratch, and I'll share all sorts of tricks and techniques along the way. Everything from creating emotional chords, layering tips, fun ear candy tricks, and more. But before we get into all of that, I'll quickly play the final result for you. One more thing before we get started, the drop that we'll be producing today is based on one of the synth loops included in our new Ashes sound bank. It's this loop right here. As always, all the stems and MIDI are included, so that's where you can get your hands on this drop. But here's something we've never done before. In the description, you can find a link to get your hands on this FL Studio project file. That's right, once we finish recording this video and producing the drop, we'll save the project file and upload it to our website. However, since this drop is based on a loop from Ashes, you can only download this project file if you own a copy of Ashes. When you click the link, instructions will be provided on how to do this. But yeah, whether you're interested in this project file or not, Ashes is a pack you should get either way. It's an ILLENIUM inspired sound bank with 100 high quality sound presets, over 1600 samples and loops, and 8 project files. It's one of the best packs we've made lately, and if you want to produce insanely powerful drops like this, Ashes should be your go-to library for that. A link to get Ashes will also be down in the description. Okay, so now let's get into it. First, I want to lay down some emotional chords. I'll just open up an empty Serum instance for that. After spending a few months creating Ashes, here's what we learned about writing beautiful chord progressions like ILLENIUM. His chords sound complex without them actually being complex. Here's what I mean. First, we'll lay down our bass line or root note. I'm going to be in the key of C sharp minor, so let's go with something simple like C sharp, E, B, and end it with F sharp. I always like to copy and paste these and put them an octave down just to cover a bit of low end with our chords as well. Now, as mentioned, ILLENIUM's chords aren't really complex at all. You won't hear crazy chords that are made up of like 8 to 10 different notes. So let's do some basic triads first. I'll select our root note again, duplicate it, and bring it up to G sharp. This would be our 5th. I'll do the same thing again and bring this up to E. This would be our 3rd. One thing to note, if we just duplicate our root notes like this and move them all at once, it will sound fine and in key for our 5th. However, that's not the case with our 3rd. So if I play just this, you'll notice that things sound out of key. Depending on which key you're in, you'll either want to move the wrong notes up or down a semitone to fix this. We don't want this video to be about basic music theory, and I'm sure most of you already know how triads are made. Since we're in C sharp minor, I already know that these G, D, and A notes are not part of our scale. Let's just grab them and put them up a semitone. There you go, some basic triads. Now let's get into the first trick here. One of the techniques ILLENIUM likes to use to make his basic chords sound more complex are octave jumps on the 3rd. Here's what I mean. Let's give our chords a quick listen again. While our 2nd chord sounds a bit high with this G sharp 5 up here, it could definitely still work fine like this. Our 4th chord on the other hand, with that A sharp 5 up there, definitely sounds a bit too high. So let's select this G sharp 5 and this A sharp 5 and bring them down an octave. Now our chords all of a sudden sound way more controlled. However, musically, nothing has changed. It's still the same chords and the same simple triads. Without going too much into complex music theory or the science behind how we humans perceive chords, I think the basic answer here is that our ears tend to focus on the top notes of our chords. Since we brought the third down an octave on our second and fourth chord, the fifth is now the top note and the focus note there, resulting in a new top line melody that our ears focus on. And these particular 4 focus notes probably just sound ever so slightly better than the 4 notes we had before. So the next time you write chords, try paying attention and be selective about which note is your chord's top note. Let's spice up our chords even further with some 7th and 9th notes. Again, ILLENIUM's chords are quite simple, so he's very picky when adding more notes to them. So let's leave the first chord as is and try adding the 7 or 9 to the second chord. A quick tip here, the 7 is always the first note underneath your chord's root note, and the 9 is the first note above. Our second chord's root note is E, so in C sharp minor, our first note underneath is D sharp. That's our 7, and the first note above is F sharp. That's our 9. Let's try both. Both sounded great, but I personally prefer the 7, so let's go with that. Let's skip the third chord again and try something on the fourth chord. Okay, neither the 7 nor 9 sounded good here, so let's try something more unusual and add a 4 maybe, which in this case would be the note B. Yeah, that sounds nice. Let's give everything a listen again. Now, here's one more thing that ILLENIUM does to make his chords sound more complex than they usually are. I'm sure there's a specific term for this, but I'll call this technique transition notes. Basically, he'll often add notes to his chords right before the next chord comes in, to create a sort of transition in between the chords. Here's what I mean. For example, in our first chord, let's just add this F sharp and D sharp here. See? Notice how much better the chords transition. Let's do the same for our third chord. I don't like the E here. Let's put that down to C sharp as well. Sounds fantastic if you ask me. Again, our chords right here aren't really that complex. They're fairly simple. But thanks to these 3 simple tricks and techniques, they sound super emotional and are a perfect foundation for our future bass drop. So let's go ahead and pick some sounds for these chords. I've got these all prepared already and we'll be using 3 layers. First, this huge supersaw layer. Let's grab our chords and paste them in there. By the way, the original synth loop for this drop was made way before the Ashes sound bank was completed. So the sounds in this project either come from hardware synths or are presets from other packs of ours. As you can see, this supersaw layer is from our Nurture pack, and it's based on Porter's song called Everything Goes On. I only tweaked the preset slightly, but this is what it sounds like with our chords. A pretty solid supersaw layer. The next layer is actually the same preset, just with the no detune macro turned up. As you can imagine, that macro just removes the detune, giving us a more regular saw sound. We'll also have a support layer here. This is just a lead sound that we'll use to emphasize one line of notes in our chords. Let's go with these notes. We explored this technique in our previous ILLENIUM video already, but it's basically there to help our saw chords sound less like plain saw chords. It won't make our chords sound drastically bigger or fuller, it just makes them sound a bit more unique. That's it for our chords. I would typically process each layer individually, but I'm using our presets here, and there's really no processing I need to do since our presets already sound very well balanced. So all of these can go right into the same mixer channel. In here, let's do some super basic processing. First, let's add OTT. You can't go wrong with this plugin. With the mix at 100%, I always like to play with the individual bands a little, just to dial in the sound and frequency signature that I like. Once that's done, let's bring the mix down to 30%. Next, I'll add Gullfoss. This is essentially just a dynamic EQ that helps balance out the sound a bit. As you can see, it's barely doing anything since our presets are already well balanced. Finally, let's add an EQ to clean things up a bit, mainly the low end. Since we want to reserve that space for our bass line, let's add a smooth low cut at around 100 Hz. This is not a must, but I feel like our chords could benefit from a little more sizzle in the high end, so let's add a slight boost at 10 kHz. That's it for the chords. Let's do our bass line next. Here we'll use two layers, a simple sub layer and then a wider Reese bass layer. The sub layer is this basic serum patch. It's actually just using the noise oscillator as a sampler. In the original synth loop, this sublayer was made using one of our analog synths. Since we'll be giving away the FLP file, we thought we'd sample a one shot of this layer and drag it into Serum so that you can actually play it yourself. As mentioned, our second bass layer is a Reese bass. It's again a patch from our Porter Robinson inspired Nurture pack. Here's how they sound together. It sounds cool already, but we can beef things up with some more effects here. So let's assign these to their own mixer channels. The sublayer could definitely benefit from distortion. Let's try RC20. This is more of a multi-FX lo-fi plugin, but we really like using just the distortion unit here. We also really like thermal, so let's go through some presets here. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's process our Reese layer next. I think I'll just drag and drop the same effects from our sublayer over onto this one. Okay, I think the RC20 definitely sounds a bit too intense here, so let's try a different distortion type. That's much better. Let's grab these two layers and route them through a new mixer channel. This will just group them together so I can use something like OTT again to glue both layers together a bit. Here's how everything sounds together. Let's do our lead next. This one's fairly simple. In the original loop, this was once again a lead sound from one of our analog synths. So I went back, sampled the sound into a one shot and dragged it into Serum. So it's actually a playable sound inside our DAW. Before we get into processing this sound, we need a melody first. ILLENIUM likes to keep his melodies really simple and repetitive since that's what's going to make melodies catchy and memorable. This entire vibe of our drop doesn't really feel like it needs a traditional melody. This drop really focuses on the huge chords we just came up with. I don't really want our melody to get in the way of these chords, so I'll go with a melody that utilizes longer notes and somewhat follows the rhythm of our chords. To make this process a bit easier for myself, I'll go back to our chords pattern and write down the melody here on top of our chords. I think I like these notes right here. I don't feel like this is the catchiest melody in the world, but it definitely fits the vibe and works well. By the way, another quick tip. As you can see, with our melody I mainly decided to stick to notes that are part of the chords underneath. This is not a must, but it can help glue things together a bit, and it's quite effective, especially when doing complementary melodies like this. Now, since our lead sound is just a fairly raw and simple analog layer, let's add some effects and make this thing crazy powerful. Distortion is going to be your number one friend here, so let's try adding RC20 again. I like that already. Let's add an EQ next. I have this idea in my head where we can automate the high end in the empty sections between our chords. See, I left all this space here, which is perfect for doing some creative stuff. Just like that. I think we can distort and make this lead much dirtier. Let's add another RC20. With all this distortion, our low end is a little muddy now, so let's add another EQ, remove the low frequencies and tame the mids a little. This sound is super dry, so let's add a reverb next. I really like using the Valhalla Vintage Verb, but any reverb plugin goes. This sounds great, but I think we can do a bit more in the empty sections here. Let's add another RC20, really mess up the sound, and then just automate the magnitude slider. Yeah, this is nice. This RC20 reintroduces a bit of low end with all the distortion again, so let's just add another EQ to roll off the low end again. Here's everything together. This sounds super solid already, and our drop could be considered done for sure. However, ILLENIUM likes using weird glitch percussion samples, and the empty spaces between our chords scream for some of those glitchy samples. Let's dig into the Ashes glitch percussion folder and grab some samples. This one fits perfectly. This one does too. I think these two are enough for this section. Let's try something different over here, maybe a low impact. This one works, but let's try something more creative. Let's duplicate this low impact, pitch it up an octave and reverse it. That's super dope, but we can automate an RC20 here as well. Let's try it. I like that. Here's everything together. Adding ear candy like this is definitely another amazing technique to really spice up your drops without much effort. Just to make these a little less repetitive, let's change the low impact in the second half of our drop. Maybe a more subtle sub impact could work here since this is the end of our section anyway. Sounds fantastic. One thing I noticed here is that our lead sounds a little aggressive at the end. Let me just duplicate this pattern and drop the melody down an octave just at the end here. Yep, much better. This is pretty much it, but before we wrap things up, let's quickly add some drums. Drums, especially ILLENIUM's drums, can be super complex. I don't want this video to be super long, so I'll just grab one of the drum loops from the Ashes sample pack. However, if you want, I'd be down to do a full video just on drums like these. If you want to see that, let us know in the comments. Since our project is at 150 BPM, let's dive right into the 150 BPM drum loops. This one's nice and has a similar vibe with all of the glitchy stuff going on in there. Let's use this one. To ensure our drums, especially the kick drum, cut through the mix, let's add a sidechain. Just to keep things simple and do this quick, I'm going to route all drop elements to one mixer channel, name it sidechain, and add a volume automation. This should do the job. Let's quickly add this automation clip under all the kicks. That's it. This sounds crazy good if you ask me. We could definitely spend some more time here and refine the mix a little to make things sound cleaner, but for the sake of this video, this will do, and it sounds extremely good. But yeah, that's it. That's how we just produced a powerful future bass drop in the style of ILLENIUM and how you can produce one too. Again, if you own a copy of Ashes and you're also an FL Studio user, head to the link in the description to download this project file for free. Bye for now.